Hey, what's up, YouTube, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Today we're going to be covering AR VR. We've got a special guest with us today for this, so we look forward to it, and let's get the show rolling. Hi, folks, I'm RB. Welcome to the next episode of the RB Reports. As you saw in our introduction, today we're covering AR and VR, price points, comparisons, and basically what you're going to get for your money. Today with us we have Greg on the air, and he's going to be helping us draw a point in comparison between these things. Say hi to the folks, Greg.
Hey, how y'all doing?
So I think the first things that we're going to look at is the two big ones that have been announced to be coming out this month. Actually, it was when they start shipping, as they've already opened the pre-orders, which is the Oculus and the Vive. I guess the first thing to start with would be the hardware specs for the two. I mean, you got anyone who's been following this stuff knows that there's a major price point difference between the two. You know, you've got the $800 for the Vive versus $600 for the Oculus, and you know there's still so much that a lot of people don't know about it. So I guess, Greg, what would you start with on this?
In terms of the Vive, I really like the fact that it comes with such a dynamic package. It includes everything that the Oculus does not, including the touch sensors and everything. It also has the potential to be an AR headset, given further development. But yeah, that's the biggest thing with this one. I think if you're looking to keep things simple, and if you want to get the whole package just all in one deal, this is definitely the better way to go.
Now, we do know that sometime by the end of the year, Oculus will be rolling out their own touch controller thingies. Do you think that's going to shift the market at all between the two headsets?
Um, it might. The big thing is, once again, whether people want to keep things simple, and I think the big deal is going to be the price because for the extra $200, the Vive already has it. So if they can keep the price lower, I think it will affect the market a bit and shift it a bit more towards the Rift, just because of it's been around longer. It's gone through a lot more testing. Overall, it's just a much more popular product. I mean, for anybody who knows anything about the VR headsets or AR headsets, the Rift is usually the first one to come up in a conversation. So I think as long as they can do that and keep the price of the controllers low, it will shift the market in the favor of the Rift.
I think at last estimate, the controllers for the Rift were priced at about $150 to $200.
Okay, so that's definitely keeping it right there, and that'll actually put it right around the same price in the end.
Yeah, I think at this point in between the two, it's going to depend on what the gamers and developers and everyone wants right out the gate. Because as you stated, the Vive is the complete package. It's got the sensors, it's got the different hardware on the headset. It comes with the controllers right out the gate. But from a gaming standpoint and developing standpoint, one of the biggest points of note for the Vive is the play space that they have to work with. The Oculus, you're kind of restricted to like 3 feet from your computer with the camera. You're hardwired into everything, and it can just become a rat's nest in a cluster. Whereas the Vive has the two, I believe they're called lighthouse sensors that attach to the corners of your room and can actually create up to a 15-foot, or I believe 15 by 15 actually, play space where you can actually get up, walk around, and move within the VR space. Their answer currently with the forward-facing camera that you mentioned earlier is with that to allow you to see your surroundings so you're not tripping over a pile of laundry or the family dog as you're moving around in this thing. But again, with the Oculus releasing their own Oculus Touch controllers, and I mean, they came with a wireless gamepad right out the gate. I mean, they packaged the Xbox One controller with it. But at the same time, a lot of people will see this Xbox One controller and go, well, this pretty much just cements that your experience is going to be in a chair 90% of the time. And the other, I think, deciding factor between those two, hardware platforms is their respective backers. I mean, you've got Facebook, which snapped up the Oculus company for $2 billion. I think it was, what was it, last year or something like that? because they wanted to get their foot in the door on that. But then you've got the Vive, which is backed by Steam VR and Valve. How do you think that's going to play down to it?
That's going to be a serious, serious thing there. The fact that Vive is backed by Steam, which natively develops games and distributes games, I think that's really, really going to play hugely into who chooses to buy it. Um, and it really depends on the type of gamer you are. But I think in terms of once again just an overall good deal. Um, and the understanding that Steam is the one who's backing this and working on the development for it gives it a lot of potential to integrate it into their games and give you a much wider game base. So I think the Vive has definitely got a lot more potential for PC gamers.
Well, the other, you mentioned game base and everything else. Um, while Steam VR is still, I guess you could say, in its infant stages and everything else, I mean, they have started saying which games are compatible with the Vive and the Oculus and everything else already. How do you feel about Oculus's launch lineup of over 30 games right out the gate?
That's impressive, and that is only something that you get with a lot of longevity, and that goes right back to what I mentioned earlier in regards to the fact that they've had a lot of prototyping and had a lot of time. Like most people have been hearing the name Oculus Rift for several years at this point, floating around. I think I think it's definitely got a lot of potential out the door, but the question is really going to be determined after they're ordered and you start to get reviews from the customers on based on the experience and how versatile the unit itself is.
Now, one of the other things that we're covering with this segment today is the fact that while these two are the biggest players on the market right now, they're not the consumer's only options, are they?
No, absolutely not.
I mean,
Plenty of other options out there.
I think the first one that I would personally draw interest to is the Razer OS VR Hacker. And don't ask me why it's called Hacker. It might be just a pun, or it might do with the fact that it's a open source virtual reality headset. It's released by Razer. I believe the price tag right now is sitting around $299.99 for the orders for it. But what they've done with it is they've actually released the blueprints, the source code, and everything open source on the internet. So I mean, anyone with a 3D printer and the hardware knowledge could actually build one of these things in their basement.
Yeah, with the price tag and with the fact that it's all open source, developers are going to be making a beeline for this thing.
The other thing that's good about the Razer, at least in my opinion, and most of us here at RB Productions and RB Nation, is the fact that it's backed by Razer. When the Oculus first came out and they were, doing that whole demonstration of hands moving in, the virtual space and everything, they were using Razer's proprietary Razer Hydra controller to do it. And now the company that's behind that is launching into the VR. Do you think that's going to swing the market at all?
Absolutely. It is a company that has made products for gamers for a very long time. They really did pioneer their way into the motion sensing controller. I think that's going to have a huge effect for anybody who's a diehard Razer fan. This is really going to be a huge plus for them and a huge little bit of happiness here now that they're actually coming out with their own VR headset.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the release of the OS VR couldn't have been timed better, honestly, because it's been out already. You can order it now and it will be at your door within 5 to 7 business days. And the other good thing about the Razer is they're pairing it with their Sixth Sense motion controller system, which is due to release soon, if not already by the time this video is up. Which can be expanded from just single hand tracking to dual hand tracking to entire body tracking, which, from what I understand, I haven't gotten a hands-on demo of it yet, but it seems to actually work a little bit better in certain regards than the positional tracking on the headsets.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge plus point here. Obviously cameras versus integrated sensors. That's going to give you a huge potential advantage. It really just depends on the range.
I mean, but on the flip side of the coin, VR isn't just limited to PCs either. I mean, another one is the PlayStation VR, which is previously known as Project Morpheus by them, is a PlayStation virtual reality headset. But from what I understand from early, I guess we'll say hands on with it, a lot of people haven't been very impressed.
Impressed with the Morpheus?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a price point sitting around $399.99, which is a lot less than some of its rivals with the Oculus and the Vive and things like that. But at the same time, it's based off of the PlayStation Move technology, which wasn't exactly groundbreaking.
Right, exactly. The other thing is that you're also limited to their consoles, which is a
Yeah.
huge disadvantage as compared to something like the Razer or the Rift, that you can go between different consoles based on a video output.
Well, I mean, speaking of different platforms and everything else, I mean, it's VR gaming has been around for a little while, even outside of the dev kits. When Samsung released their Samsung Galaxy VR cell phone paraphernalia, which actually turned your cell phone into a VR headset.
I actually got the chance to try one of those out the other day. It's very very impressive. It's actually some really great tech. Obviously, you don't have a lot of the sensitivity that the new ones have. Not quite as many sensors and such, but it is definitely a very very interesting experience.
How would you describe it? Like, what did you do in it?
Basically, it was going around. It puts you in a virtual environment. I didn't really get too much time with it, but in the time that I did, it was essentially putting you into a virtual environment where you could navigate around your phone, select different videos and things like that, and even control games based on head movement. There weren't any other buttons or controls or anything like that to make it easier. It was actually very interesting trying to make selections and such.
Um, how would you say that how would you rate the experience, like, from a gameplay and videos and everything else? And another thing is, a lot of people have been saying with the VR headsets and everything else that there's been motion sickness and disorientation.
Well, it can definitely make things a little interesting when you're put into an environment that's moving when you yourself are not moving. I definitely wouldn't put the overall experience very high with the Samsung or with the headset that integrates your cell phone, simply because of the fact that that's not what it was meant for. You lose some resolution, you lose some quite a bit of functionality. For anyone who's a real diehard gamer or wants to expand beyond just what you can do with your phone, you definitely want to get a different headset, an actual VR AR headset.
Well, actually, resolution and everything brings us, and integration brings us to our next headset, the Sulon Q. Sulon, this one literally came out of nowhere, from what I understand. It's not nearly half as publicized as the Razer, the Oculus, the Vive, and things of that nature. But this one is being advertised as a straight up computer attached to the headset. I mean, it's its own self contained unit. Um, but it's like, I think the specs currently on it is they're partnered with AMD, so therefore it's running the AMD FX 8800P processor. It also runs with, the Radeon R7 graphics cores. I think it's got a 2560 by 1440 OLEDs display, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and a integrated freaking 256 gigabyte solid state drive.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge selling point. The fact that it is entirely self-contained. Not to mention, it also has the ability to make it an AR headset. The only thing that's got me concerned is the fact that it is using AMD hardware, which generally, based on the past, has been known to get hot. It's great for desktops, but for something small, unless you've got some kind of heavy duty cooling system, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I guess only time will tell on that.
Well, having looked at the initial specs for it, I'm hoping the design gets revamped a few times, because from the looks of it right now, the primary graphic stuff is built into the headset itself behind the OLED displays, similar to the Oculus and the Vive and everything else. But the primary computer processing and stuff would be going in the back of your head, similar to where, a ponytail sits. And as you stated, those things do tend to heat up pretty good. I mean, have you ever felt a tower after running something on maximum super settings for hours on end without a cooling system?
A tower, try a laptop.
Yeah, and put that on the
Any,
back of your head. That's not going to be pleasant.
no, definitely not. And that was, yeah, that was definitely a big deal. The specs are very, very impressive. There's no doubt about that. Running eight GPU cores, that's crazy. And then the 2560 by 1440 OLED display, that's very up to date on technology. Um, but yeah, that temperature is going to be a big, big thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I think AMD is really trying to help cut the strain on the graphics core is they're using a proprietary self-designed liquid VR system, which is supposed to make it run a little bit cooler, but again, there hasn't really been much trials on it, and as far as I'm aware, they haven't necessarily released a dev kit for people to get their hands on yet.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely going to be something, definitely something worth waiting on to hear more from people who have actually used it.
I think the other two big selling points of the Sulon, personally, is the fact that A, it's wireless, and whereas the other ones, even the Vive and everything else, are wired and you're kind of restricted in terms of movement, but also the spatial processing that's built into the Sulon, which basically will create not like something you're watching in a tiny screen, but an actual 3D map of your surroundings.
Right, that's where it starts to delve into the realm of AR.
Which actually brings us to our next one, the Microsoft HoloLens, which is, in terms of a price point, probably the most expensive one that you're going to find on this list today. I think the price tag currently is sitting around, what is it, 3 grand, give or take?
Yep, yep, exactly. $3,000 is what you're going to pay out the door for one of these bad boys.
Now, we were talking before the show, and you mentioned that you knew or were familiar quite a bit with the HoloLens here, so why don't we let you say a little bit on that one?
I can definitely say a lot about this. I haven't had the chance to try it, unfortunately, but I can definitely tell you that in terms of augmented reality, this really is the ultimate thing on the market currently. You have a lot of features. You've got so many sensors, and the fact that you can actually take 3D objects and place them in your environment really makes it useful for a lot of things. Not so much gaming as for development, whether you're running some kind of 3D development or even game development. It really gives you that ability to put objects into an environment as opposed to what you had with the Sulon, where you're taking your environment and placing it into your virtual reality. So yeah, this is also self-contained. It's got it's got a whole computer, but essentially built into the thing. I'm not familiar with the actual specifications. I know they're definitely higher end. I'm going to see if I can find anything here.
Let's see here. What it says about the HoloLens that I've seen so far on it is very vague. I mean, it's designed to be a little bit more comfortable. You wear it like a pair of sunglasses from what the images show. Um,
Yeah, it's very, very small. It's very compact too, so definitely not the hulk of a system that you get with the Sulon.
yeah, and one of the big things that they're using to, for lack of a better phrase, pimp the HoloLens is the fact that it contains more computing power than an average laptop while being passively cooled without fans. And I know cooling was one of your concerns with some of the other headsets.
Absolutely, and once again, due to the lack of actual details on this, I'm not sure what brand of processor they use. I don't know if they use something proprietary or if they're running Intel. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not entirely certain on it because specs have been kind of vague when it comes to this particular one. I do know that it uses spatial audio sounds on it for with built-in integrated speakers so that you can hear and everything else. Very similar to the Oculus's take on audio, where it's got the built-in, headphones, earbuds, and everything else. Whereas the Vive and the other headsets, they allow you to use your own headphones or computer speakers or whatever whatever you want to do.
Right. Yeah, this one is definitely going to be more oriented towards creative developers or artists due to the fact that you can actually manipulate items in an existing environment. and still maintain a very good view of everything around you. It's good for visualizing an environment in something that's already there, as opposed to creating a whole new environment for yourself.
I mean, from what I'm looking at on this in terms of specs, it uses about 5 to 7 forward-facing cameras to do the overlay, plus the projector onto the screen. It also uses a high definition lens for optical projection system to basically simulate a multi-dimensional view while wearing nothing larger than, say, a pair of sunglasses.
Well, it's a little bit larger than a pair of sunglasses, but not
Okay,
by too much.
in terms of hardware it's running, they're using something new on it that they are calling an HPU, a holographic processing unit. That's really about all they have on the specs. The only other real information that they've released on it is the fact that it's shipping March 30th.
Yeah, so that might be something worth looking up on in the future here and seeing how that works out.
I mean, it's
Def-
definitely going to be one that's going to be worth a watch, but I don't think they're going to really get too many buyers and whatnot until um, they actually drop that price tag.
Right. Well, at this point, the only way to get it, it seems, is to actually apply for a, developer's license. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems the only way to get it at this point. Um, So I think as soon as they're past the initial developing stage, I'm sure the prices will go down. Once it's not such a new technology.
Yeah, that seems about right here. Um, Another one that kind of, if you're into the cell phone thing, I mean, there's also the LG 360 VR, which is instead of actually mounting your phone into the freaking headset, it uses a USB Type C cable to actually connect to your phone's mini USB port to cause a display and everything else onto the headset. Uh,
And
but
that's definitely much smaller and much more economical
yeah, I mean the resolution isn't that great on it. I mean it's only got a resolution of 960 by 720
per eye or for the whole thing.
for the whole thing. It looks like.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah,
no, excuse me, I take it back. It's got 1.8-inch IPS displays, one for each eye, each with a resolution of 960 by 720,
okay.
resulting in 639 ppi.
So yeah, definitely a much lighter weight, it's more of an economy model of everything else that we've been seeing.
Yeah, the only major issue that I personally and some other people might have with it is, with the Oculus and the Vive and the OSVR and things of that nature, you can actually wear glasses inside of it because, it's got the adjustable headset and everything else. Whereas, things like the Samsung Galaxy VR and the LG 360 VR, you can't because they basically replace your glasses.
Right. Yeah, and that was definitely a problem I noticed even with the Samsung one that you stick the phone in was I wear glasses, so the lenses were very very close to your eyes, and the only way to actually wear it was to take my glasses off.
Yeah, and I mean, then you've got, the 100 million knockoffs of the phone-based one, like the Zeiss R1 and the one GTX, the Hamido, and then just go to Amazon and friggin' search VR, and you're gonna have probably 30,000 VR headset knockoffs show up, but none of them are really PC based. It seems like the only major contenders for that one right now are the OSVR, the Vive, and the Rift.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, as with any product, there will always be knockoffs or people trying to replicate an idea, and generally they don't do it as well as the initial companies do.
I think that on the initial offset out the gate, I think the biggest consideration that a lot of people are going to have is going to be the price point, because it's like the Oculus, they're saying that the hardware you need to run it is ridiculous. It needs its own dedicated HDMI port and everything else, meaning that General Joe Blow with an HP computer sitting at home that just basically uses it for YouTube and Netflix is going to be somewhat in trouble because it doesn't have the graphics capability to render to the Oculus. And a lot of people aren't going to want to spend $15 to $2,000 on a a dedicated gaming rig and then go and spend another $600 to $800 on a VR headset. And I think that particular comparison is what the Sulon Q and the HoloLens are kind of banking on with the all-in-one units.
Right, absolutely. The Rift and the OSVR and the Vive are definitely ones for individuals who already have a decent computer or have the money to throw around.
What would you say, in your opinion, being a gamer, would be the minimum specs you'd want to see on a tower to try to run VR?
Well, it depends on the headset, depends on the resolution, depends on the game. Honestly, for most modern games, I would definitely say a minimum of probably 8 gigs of RAM. Definitely, obviously, DDR3 or DDR4, depending on whether or not you have an AMD or Intel system. I would definitely say somewhere around 3 gigahertz, minimum of a quad core processor. Um, Honestly, as far as a GPU goes, I'm not 100% sure. Once again, it really depends on the game. Overall, all around, ATI R9 is I've heard is pretty good. No experience with it myself. Yeah, I'm not actually too familiar with the specs that would be required. I'm not sure what are the resolutions that we
Um,
have on these different systems.
well, one that I decided to look at right now was just for the sake of a comparison thing. And it turns out the Oculus doesn't actually provide a minimum recommended spec list, really. Instead, it kind of combines them into one list. They're saying that to run their headset, at a decent output, is a minimum NVIDIA GTX 970 graphics card with an Intel i5 processor or better. It needs a minimum of 8 gigabytes RAM, an HDMI 1.3 output, 3 USB 3.0 ports, one USB 2.0 port, and Windows 7 or better.
Okay, so I was definitely calling for overkill there
Well,
in terms of minimum specs.
I would say that that's not necessarily a bad thing, though. I
Oh
mean,
no.
it's if you want to render it at its utmost capacity, I would say probably a top of the line gaming PC would be you know necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. It all depends on the experience you want to get out of it.
Yeah, and I
I
was
mean, you can use it to sit and watch YouTube videos, or you can go out and you can play Just Cause 3 or something, with the graphics bumped all the way up.
yeah, I was trying to. Okay, hold on. I think I actually found the HTC Vive's spec requirements here. Um, except for the fact that they want to give
Virtual
me
reality.
frickin' ads.
Here you go,
um,
PC recommendations. Minimum here it says it's GTX 970 or a Radeon R9. All right, well I got something right. The Intel i5 4590, minimum of 4 gigs of RAM, an HDMI or DisplayPort. Ooh, I didn't know it was compatible with DisplayPort. USB 2.0 or greater, and Windows 7 SP1 or newer.
and then with the OSVR, from what we understand of that one, spec wise, is it's designed to pretty much run on any system that's running, within the last 5 years.
Right. Yeah, it's a developer system. There's a lot that's gonna come out of this.
And again, I don't think they're necessarily overly concerned about PC specs for the, OSVR due to the fact that they open sourced it and can let Joe Blow manufacture this thing in his basement.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, a comparison between, the three major ones right now, it's in terms of the most complete package and, bang for the buck and, price point to get up and running. I think the Vive is kind of winning the edge out here.
Yeah, in terms of individuals who want to get everything all in one package, in terms of something, as long as you've got an existing computer that's got a good amount of power to it, then the Vive is definitely top of the list.
I would think so. I mean, I'm looking forward to the day that I can start, playing like Halo and Gears of War and things like that in a VR environment, and you know, many curse words later as I'm banging my shins off my coffee table.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to get the crap scared out of you.
I mean, it's one of the most popular genres on VR right now is the jump scare games, the horror games.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I guess I can see why.
I mean, it's like you got these little fuckers creeping up on you, and it's just like, oh Jesus. And with proper spatial audio and everything else, it actually sounds like they're standing right behind you and breathing into your ear and everything else.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just got to be careful what you're getting into with VR because, as always, there's going to be industry nut jobs that are trying to do something completely retardedly stupid about it. And I mean, I think it's going to really come down to, I mean, hardware wise, the Oculus Rift is probably the most polished and refined, but it also requires, the biggest investment in PC specs
PC
because
specs and additional hardware.
hence why I said it's the bigger investment because you may be paying 600 to get the box out the gate, but with the touch controllers and if you have to upgrade your system with a new graphics card and everything else, it's probably going to require a lot more money.
Yeah, you're going to probably be sitting somewhere around 850 or $900 by the time all's said and done, and that's just to meet your minimum requirements.
I mean, the only good thing really about the Rift right now is that it is actually listed as the consumer version 1 model. So it's, as we stated earlier, it's gone through multiple iterations and variations and testing. And I mean, it's probably the smoothest of all of them right now. So I think it's going to really come down to, unfortunately, brass tacks numbers. I mean, how much does someone want to pay for a VR experience?
Yep, basically. But then again, you have to consider that all of these have to be narrowed down to really what you plan on doing with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still very early into the VR generation. I mean, you had the Game Boy VR or the Virtual Boy that came out from Nintendo way back when.
Ah, it gives you headaches.
Exactly, and a lot of people with developer kits of the Oculus, the Vive, and other headsets like that, complained of similar issues. Headaches, motion sickness, disorientation, balance. I mean, there's so many different things that you have to take into consideration. But I think as we see the next several years go on, we'll be seeing leaps and bounds in terms of the hardware and software and technology, as well as multiple other applications than just gaming and basic development properties.
Oh yeah, it's definitely we're at the beginning of something that's very, very revolutionary. The sets are going to get smaller, they're going to get more versatile as time goes on. You're going to be able to do so many things, and chances are is I would have to say that probably by 2028, there's not going to be a person out there who doesn't have one of these for daily life.
I mean, I think it was actually in. I'd have to look up the article again, but there was an article probably about 4 or 5 months ago about a Kickstarter campaign that was working on creating the first prototype of like the Star Trek Holo deck using a spatial positioning system that they built in conjunction to work with a Oculus or similar VR headset. Would you see things like that going out the window with the introduction of AR?
Um, I don't think so. I think there's always going to be a place for VR. You had mentioned earlier that there's some people who want to create their own environment as opposed to use what's already there. Um, I'm not actually familiar with the Kickstarter project you're mentioning. What was it called?
Like I said, I'd have to look it back up, but it was basically a mat that was built on a platform with sensors under it to track where your feet move, and then it's got a harness that allows you to turn and move and run in place, similar to a 360-degree treadmill, so to
Oh, okay.
speak, to account for walking and movement and everything else while keeping the body basically stationary so that you don't outrun the reach of the cords and everything else connecting the VR headset. And I believe it was prototyped and tested using the Razer controllers, the Razer Hydra for hand motion and tracking.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. I have seen videos of this floating around. It looked exactly like a 360-degree treadmill. I think that's going to have a lot of potential. I don't, however, think it's going to have as much potential as devices that you can take anywhere. Simply because of the fact that augmented reality is it really, really puts you if you're able to put items or things in your environment, it's basically like laser tag without having to go somewhere. You're not limited in your environment, as
Yeah.
opposed to this treadmill looking thing. You are limited to what you can do and where you can go.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this technology continues developing down the road, and we're hoping at some point to get our hands on one of these headsets so that we can actually bring a tech comparison. After having had some hands-on time with one. Thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences with different things and your opinions as well today.
Sure thing. Thanks for the invitation.
Not a problem. We hope to get you back on the show at some point. So you guys know the drill at this point. You know where the like and subscribe buttons are if you enjoy what we want to do. Hit us up on Twitter if you have something that you'd like to see make it to next week's show, or a different subject that you'd like to see us cover. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.